I spoke to the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern before we came to air this evening and asked her about today's announcement. Have you sold out?
Absolutely not. Our goal is to reduce emissions, to stay within 1.5 degrees and to get to consensus, and that's exactly what we've delivered today.
How? How have you delivered that?
Well, we've set out a plan now where by 2025 we will be the first country in the world that has a pricing mechanism for agricultural emissions. No one in the world has done that yet. We've done that not only together, we've built consensus around it and established a plan to get there. Ultimately, our goal has to be to maintain the position as exporters to the world of being sustainable food producers and setting out a path for how we will comprehensively deal with climate change within agriculture is part of that.
You could have done that, sustained our position as food producers and on the world market by introducing agriculture to the ETS. I mean, the government's own research shows that it would have only cost dairy 1 cent per kilo of milk solids, 1 cent per kilo of beef, and sheep 1 cent.
I'm happy to clarify. So we have done that. So what the Climate Commission came out and said was ultimately the goal has to be reducing emissions. Doing that farm by farm is the best way to go because that way we can incentivise and reward emissions reductions farm by farm. We all agree on that. The Climate Commission said actually doing that is going to take us 5 years to establish the infrastructure. We agree, so we've set down in legislation 2025 is our goal for when every farm will come in farm by farm. Then we've got what do we do in the next 5 years. Now, the Climate Commission looked at this idea of a processor levy, which is what you're talking about, the price per kg of milk solids. They actually described that as the best, worst solution. It's not ideal because it's a levy that doesn't actually incentivise behaviour change. It doesn't necessarily mean you bring down agricultural emissions. So what we went to the farming community and said was, actually, what is going to do that? If we can't actually hit what is the end point till 2025 because we just don't have the infrastructure yet, what do we do in the in-between time? And that's the plan that we've announced today. In fact, the Climate Commission, looking at what we've come up with, have said, actually, this does tick boxes. This is the kind of thing that's going to make a difference.
So what might this design look like that farmers are coming up with? What ways might they measure and price emissions? Are you talking about like a price per cow rather than actual emissions, a tax on what you produce, or what might it look like?
Yeah, so what I'm talking about is the mechanisms. Before we're able to have a pricing mechanism for emissions farm by farm, we need to be able to make sure that every farm has, for instance, some basic infrastructure and support around them. So already we do have measurement tools that are being developed, but we need then every farm to have, for instance, farm environment plans. Now, they're slowly being rolled out, but that's going to take a bit of time to do every farm in New Zealand. My hope is we'll have processes like Fonterra continue to step up. They've already said they're going to pay for every farm to have a farm environment plan. Then making sure that we develop overseer, which is our responsibility as government to help with the measurement of emissions and reduction plans. So that's the infrastructure that we're building over the next 5 years.
Why not keep it simple? Greenpeace says every serious climate change policy advises a price signal for emissions, a financial incentive to drive change. So why not just put them in the ETS, make it mandatory, set a price and go?
Because as I say, I absolutely agree with that. That does drive change. If you actually create that incentive right down at the level of the producer, rather than if you just apply a levy to a processor, then actually that doesn't necessarily change anything around emissions. So the end point, and this is where I think everyone agrees, is that goal of going farm by farm and supporting our farmers to do that, because actually we need to make sure that we're helping them then reduce down their emissions so they don't pay anything. But if you just do, as Greenpeace is suggesting, lop a levy on a processor, that doesn't necessarily reduce emissions. So we've instead produced a plan that we think will help us to get there, keeping in mind that we've also, Lisa, already have a target that we need to reduce emissions by 2030 by 10% in this area as well.
Did you need to make this compromise to get cooperation and keep New Zealand First on side?
No, I wouldn't even describe it as that. I mean, the fact that this is something that the Climate Commission looks at themselves as an option, what we've done.
So did you abandon Labor's policy on this voluntarily then? Because Labor's policy was to bring agriculture into the ETS this electoral term. So I'm wondering, did you freely give away that policy, or was it something that you needed to do for New Zealand's first sake?
No, let me just fill it. We followed the advice here of the Climate Commission, which is if you want to make a difference and bring emissions down, which we all do, go farm by farm. So 2025, that's the soonest we can do that. And in the in-between time, of course, as I'm saying, it's about making sure that we've got a plan that sticks and we do it together. I've been around politics long enough to have seen this being tried many times before. If we want to make genuine change in New Zealand around our emissions profile, we have to get some consensus. This is the first time that you will have seen government standing alongside our primary producers saying we have an agreement now. Now we can get on with it.
So this is your choice.
We hit our target.
This was your call.
Actually, what I'm disputing, Lisa, is that we've strayed away from what we said we'll do. We have legislated, and we've even put in a provision that says if we're not making the progress we need to make, if we're not on track, then we've got. But
you have strayed away from you have strayed away from Labor's pre-election policy here, and so what I'm trying to establish is if you did that freely. Or that it was to satisfy your government partners. And
Lisa, no, I'm just not going to agree with you that that's what we've done. No one in the world has done what we've done today. No one in the world yet has a pricing mechanism or plan for a pricing mechanism.
But you don't have a pricing mechanism either at this point, and it is 5 years off for agriculture.
Lisa, actually, again, I'm going to dispute that. We do, and we're legislating it, and that's what we've announced today. And
that's your fallback position, though, isn't it, Prime Minister? If you can't come to an agreement with this group, with these agricultural interest groups, you will step in and include them in the ETS if not enough progress is being made.
So, Lisa, no, we've got that if on the pathway to that pricing, the farm by farm, we're not making enough progress, we have that ability. Of course, the farming leaders and community are saying that actually they think there's a better way than the ETS, a pricing mechanism, yes, but the Climate Commission has said a levy of some sort or something like that. It hasn't been designed yet. So
in the
we want to create the certainty, and that's why we've legislated with the ETS. But again, I do think we need to keep a bit of perspective here. If we're the first in the world, we need to make sure we do it properly. We need to make sure we get it right, and that's why we're working collaboratively. And I'm proud of that. This is not shying away from anything. This is staring down a challenge and saying we will keep our competitive advantage as a nation as sustainable food producers and the best in the world by doing this first, but doing it together.
And that was Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern speaking there.